The wind carried a sound you wouldn't normally hear in Pine Hollow, a sound so small, so faint, it could have been nothing. But Hunter heard it. The 5-year-old sable German shepherd froze mid-step, his ears sharp against the February gloom. Beside him, Deputy Grayson Cole felt the leash tighten. He knew that stance, nose low, tail stiff, eyes fixed like the dog had just found a trail to something that mattered. And in Grayson's experience, when Hunter locked onto something, you listen. The houses on Lincoln Court looked like they'd been asleep for a decade. Paint peeled in strips from the siding, porches sagged under the weight of wet leaves, and mailboxes leaned like they'd given up. Beyond the cul-de-sac, skeletal maples rattled in the wind. The whole street smelled of cold dirt and something older, abandonment. Grayson stepped out of his patrol SUV, boots crunching the gravel. The air was heavy with the promise of rain. Oregon rain, the kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. Hunter pulled toward the second-to-last house, the one with the porch half collapsed and the roof caved in over what must have been a little girl's bedroom once. Even from here, Grayson could see a scrap of faded pink wallpaper clinging to the exposed studs. "Easy, Buddy," Grayson murmured, loosening his grip on the leash. Hunter wasn't being aggressive. This was the search stance, all business. Whatever he'd caught wind of wasn't a raccoon or a stray cat. This was different. Grayson followed the pull around the side yard, past a section of fence that had rotted away into the grass. The ground was uneven, pocked with old garden beds and the skeletal remains of tomato cages. Then Hunter stopped, dead still. A low, throaty growl rumbled from his chest. That's when Grayson heard it, so faint he almost thought he imagined it. A voice, high, weak, 2 words, "Help, please." Grayson's pulse kicked. His training took over. "Hunter, stay," he ordered, crouching low. At his feet was a rusted metal grate, half hidden under a pile of wet leaves. Beneath it, darkness. The air rising from below was stale, damp, and tinged with the sour smell of mildew. "Hello?" he called, leaning closer. "This is Deputy Cole. Can you hear me?" There was a pause. Then, the smallest sound, like a breath catching in fear. Hunter barked once, sharp and urgent, the kind of bark that cut through hesitation. The grate was locked with a corroded chain. Grayson jogged back to his SUV, grabbed a crowbar from the trunk, and hurried back. With one hard pull, the chain gave way. The grate clanged against the dirt. The opening was just wide enough for a man to squeeze through if he didn't mind scraping a few ribs. He shined his flashlight into the hole. At first, nothing, just rotted wood beams and the jagged mouth of an old root cellar. Then, in the far corner, 2 shapes shifted, small shapes. Children. The first girl, he had her arms locked tight around the second, like she could keep her safe by sheer will. Their clothes were worn thin, one in a pale blue hoodie 2 sizes too small, the other in a wool dress with sneakers missing the laces. Both had long, tangled hair matted with dust. "I'm here to help," Grayson said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You're safe now. Can you tell me your names?" The older girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Lila and June." "Lila and June," he repeated, glancing up toward the opening where Hunter's head appeared, ears pointed forward. "That's Hunter up there. He found you." June, the smaller one, stirred at the sound of the dog's name. Her eyes darted toward the shaft of light where Hunter's silhouette stood waiting. Grayson moved slowly, extending a hand. "Can you stand?" Lila nodded faintly. She rose on unsteady legs, then helped June to her feet. Step by step, he guided them toward the stairs. Hunter was waiting at the top, tail low but steady. When Lila stepped onto the grass, Hunter gave a soft whine and licked the back of her hand. June pressed her face into his neck, breathing in like she'd just found the only safe place in the world. The rain started again, thick, slow flakes drifting down from a sky the color of wet slate. Within minutes, the wail of sirens cut through the stillness. 2 ambulances and a patrol car rolled to a stop. EMTs swarmed in, wrapping the girls in thermal blankets, checking their vitals and speaking in gentle voices. "Dehydrated but stable," one said, glancing at Grayson. "Lucky, real lucky." The girls clung to Hunter until the very last moment, their fingers curling into his fur like they were afraid he'd vanish. Grayson stood back, watching the ambulance doors close. His eyes tracked the girls through the small rear windows until the vehicle turned out of sight. Hunter stayed at his side, gaze fixed on the road, as if memorizing the way. For the first time in months, Grayson felt something unfamiliar stirring under the usual armor of cynicism and old guilt. Hope. By the time they rolled back toward the station, The sky had darkened into early night. Streetlights glowed on the wet pavement, halos in the drizzle. Grayson glanced at Hunter in the passenger seat. The dog was still alert, ears tilting with every sound outside. But there was something else in his posture, a kind of watchfulness that went beyond duty. "Not over yet, is it?" Grayson muttered. Hunter didn't look at him, but the answer was in his stillness. If you're just joining us, you're watching a true story of courage and instinct. And if you love stories where animals become heroes, make sure you hit that subscribe button to Heroes for Animals so you never miss one. We share the moments that prove four legs can change a life. Back at the precinct, Grayson filed the initial report, but the details felt too thin. No last name, no known address, no sign of parents. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Cole, you've got a visitor. Says she knows your dog." In the lobby stood Samantha Reyes, the town's veterinarian. Her dark hair was pulled into a braid, a navy jacket damp from the rain. She smiled briefly at Grayson, then looked down at Hunter. "Anything broken?" she asked. "He's fine," Grayson said. "The girls? Not so much." Hunter stepped forward to greet her, but there was no playful wag. Instead, he stood still, leaning his shoulder against her leg, in that subtle way dogs sometimes communicate something's wrong. Samantha's brow furrowed. He's stressed, heart rate's up. Whatever he found, it's sticking with him. Grayson didn't answer right away. He'd seen Hunter work dozens of cases, from tracking fugitives to locating missing hikers. But this was different. The dog wasn't just remembering the search. He was remembering them. And that raised the one question Grayson couldn't shake. Who had left those girls down there? And why did he get the feeling this was just the start? By the time the ambulance doors swung open at Pine Hollow Medical Center, the drizzle had thickened into a steady, whispering rain. The lobby smelled like coffee, lemon cleaner, and the faint metallic tang of a place that sees more pain than anyone wants to admit. Nurses moved the way good nurses do, fast, efficient, but soft at the edges, talking to Lila and June in voices that said, "You're safe, sweetheart," even if the words themselves were just about blankets and water and a tiny stuffed bear someone brought from a lost and found bin. Deputy Grayson Cole kept a careful distance, the badge on his chest suddenly feeling heavier than its ounce count. Hunter stayed close enough to touch his leg, a steady presence with eyes that never stopped scanning. The dog's breath fogged in small bursts in the cool air, and he tracked the girls with that unblinking, watchful stare that says mine without a sound. A pediatric nurse with auburn hair and a silver nose ring, her ID badge read Jenna, met them at the doors to an exam room. "We'll be gentle," she promised, half to the girls, half to the cop and the dog. "We're going to check vitals, give some fluids, maybe a little warm broth, nothing scary." Lila lifted her chin, the way kids do when they've decided to be brave. June kept both hands fisted in Hunter's ruff until she had to let go, and when she did, Hunter followed the gurney with a single step and a soft sound low in his chest. Grayson touched the dog's shoulder. "I know," he said quietly. "I know." They waited in a side corridor painted the color of wheat fields in July, some hospital designers guess at calm. Rain ticked against the high windows. A TV in the far corner played a news segment about a high school robotics team going to state. Nobody watched it. Samantha Reyes arrived in scrubs and a damp navy rain jacket, hair braided tight and looped over one shoulder. She didn't ask for permission. She just slid into the space beside Grayson and studied Hunter first, palms gentle along his spine and ribs. "Pulse is up," she said, brow knitting. "He's hypervigilant, and he's not leaving them." "He didn't, not once," Grayson said, "even when the EMTs loaded them." Samantha glanced through the small glass window in the exam room door. "You okay?" He let a wry breath out through his nose. "They asked me in an hour." The door opened and Jenna stepped out, carrying a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "They're dehydrated. We started IVs. No signs of serious injury. Some bruising, scratches. We'll do a CT only if we need to, but right now it's warm blankets and slow sips. They're trying not to talk." She looked at Hunter. "Can the dog sit for a bit, if we keep things controlled?" Grayson nodded, and Hunter followed them in like a shadow who'd been given orders by God. The room was small, painted the same wheat color, with a paper turkey still taped to a cabinet from last November. Lila sat upright on the bed, hands clenched in the blankets, jaw set. June leaned into her sister, eyes flicking to Hunter as if there were magnets in them. The moment the dog reached the bed, June's shoulders dropped a fraction, and her fingers found his fur. "You did good," Jenna murmured to them. "We're going to keep you warm. That's the job for now." Samantha stood to the side, close enough to steady Hunter if he decided to jump up. He didn't. He settled into a sphinx-like pose at the bed's foot, ears pricked, watching the girls as though memorizing their breathing. Grayson took a slow step forward. "My name is Grayson. I work with Hunter. You told me your first names earlier, Lila and June." "That was brave." Lila nodded, quick and mechanical. June's voice came out like a thread. "Can he stay?" "Yeah," Grayson said. "He can stay." They stayed like that for a while. The IVs dripped, the rain kept up its steady drumming, and the hallway clock took a second longer with every tick. Whenever a cart squeaked or a door latch clicked, Hunter's ears angled and settled again. Twice, June's eyes fluttered shut. Twice, she startled herself back awake. Jenna returned with a couple of steaming paper cups. "Just broth," she said, offering them like treasure. "We'll go slow." She placed a cup on the bedside tray for Grayson too, because sometimes the helper needs to be treated like a person and not a uniform. "Any last name?" she asked quietly, after the girls took careful sips. Lila's eyes flicked to the wall clock, to the IV pole, to Hunter. "No. It's okay," Jenna said. "We can do no answers today." Grayson read that for what it was. Someone taught these kids that names are dangerous. He didn't push. You don't push kids who've learned the world doesn't catch you when you fall. He stepped out so the nurses could check vitals again. In the hall, Chief Ray Carmichael stood with a styrofoam cup of black coffee and the tired posture of a man who'd seen too many budgets and not enough miracles. "Heard you found two," Carmichael said, voice low. "Hunter found them," Grayson answered. "Storm cellar under an abandoned place on Lincoln Court." "Property records?" "On it," Grayson said. "County's database is slow. I'll drive over to records if I have to. I want to know who owned it when that cellar got sealed." Carmichael looked past him toward the exam room door. "We'll call Salem for CPS. You want point?" "I want continuity," Grayson said. "We can't drop these kids into a file cabinet and hope for the best." Carmichael grunted something that meant do it, then added the thing every small-town chief has to say when he's thinking about TV trucks and budgets. "Keep a lid on it for now. We don't need headlines before we have answers." "Yeah," Grayson said, "but we do need answers." Back in the room, Jenna was taping a fresh line when June whispered, "Will he come here?" Jenna paused. "Who, sweetheart?" June's lips pressed together. Lila's grip tightened around the blanket. Hunter lifted his head and stared at the girls with the full gravity of a working dog, as if to say the thing. "I'll handle the thing." June swallowed, then shook her head fast as if she'd startled herself. "It's okay," Jenna said, and didn't write anything down. Samantha met Grayson's eyes over the bed. "We're close," her face seemed to say, "but not today." A hospital social worker arrived with soft-voiced questions and permission forms. She was good. No sharp corners, no hurry. But the girls kept their answers small. No last names, no school, no birthdays. "Can you tell me who you live with?" she tried. Lila's mouth made a straight, hard line. "We don't," she said. After an hour, the air in the room had a new heaviness. Warmth, the animal soft kind. The kind that says you made it to the other side of the worst part, even though that's not always true. Hunter stretched, then resettled, chin on pause. June copied him, like a student. Grayson slipped out again and found a quiet alcove near a vending machine. He called dispatch. "I need the last 3 years' calls for Lincoln Court and the surrounding blocks. Any 911s, wellness checks, suspicious activity. Also, lien notices, bank foreclosures, whatever flags property usually generates when it's in limbo." "You Christmas shopping?" the dispatcher joked, then heard his tone and sobered. "On it." He hung up and dialed county records. The clerk, a woman with the world's slowest keyboard and the world's kindest voice, promised to pull the chain of title on 223 Lincoln Court and scan the older deeds. "Might take me until after lunch," she said. "I can come to you," Grayson said. "I'll call when it's up," she insisted. "You sound like someone who needs 30 minutes where nothing happens. Take them." He almost laughed. "I'll try." When he returned, Jenna was negotiating terms with two 10-year-old attorneys. "A bite of crackers. That's the deal with the broth," she said, and set a short stack on the tray. "Hunter gets one," June said. "You drive a hard bargain." Jenna palmed the dog a tiny piece, and Hunter accepted it with the solemnity of a judge. Samantha cleared her throat. It might help if they could keep something of his to hold. Grayson unclipped Hunter's canine tag from the collar. "He doesn't need this part today." he said gently, and set it in June's palm. She curled her fingers around the cool metal and exhaled like it was a life jacket. The social worker suggested rest. The IV drips slowed. The room's hum dropped by a few decibels. Hunter's eyes stayed open. Grayson stepped back into the hall one more time and almost ran into a woman in a tan trench coat, rain freckles beading on the shoulders, a binder hugged against her chest. She was early 40s, her curls pulled into a bun that hadn't survived the weather. Her ID clipped to the lapel read Elena Hart, Child and Family Services. "You're Deputy Cole," she said, offering a hand. "I was already on the road to Pine Hollow for something else when the call hit my inbox." "Lucky you," he said, shaking. "We got two who don't want to be found." "Most kids who shouldn't have to be brave end up learning how," Elena said, and the way she said it made it sound like a thing that she'd said too many times. "Can I see them?" Grayson let her in. Elena stood at the foot of the bed and let the silence work before she spoke. "Hi, I'm Elena. My job is to make sure nobody hurts you and to listen if you want to talk. Listening works even if you don't use words." Lila's eyes narrowed, measuring, not angry. June twisted the tag in her fist. Elena didn't step closer. She crouched where she was, patient as weather. After a minute, she pulled a laminated card from her coat pocket and slid it onto the tray. It was a sheet of simple drawings: eyes for see, ears for hear, a hand for touch, and a little house for home, each with a yes/no bubble. "You can mark with a pen," she said, "or not." Lila flicked her gaze to Grayson, then to Hunter. She took the pen. She circled here, then tapped the little house and paused as if the pen weighed 40 pounds. She didn't circle yes. She didn't circle no. She set the pen down. Elena nodded as if that answer was the most specific one she'd hoped for. "Okay, we'll hold the house question. Smart choice." After a few more minutes, Elena stepped back into the corridor with Grayson and Samantha. "I've seen these girls before," she said, voice a notch lower. "Not them specifically, this kind of quiet. When kids hold the map and won't show it, it's usually because somebody taught them maps get you hurt." "You think a guardian?" Grayson asked. "I think whoever claims to be in charge doesn't deserve the title." She lifted her binder. "Let me dig. There was a Portland case a couple of years back with gaps big enough to swallow a family. If this connects, I'll find it." "Not on paper you won't," Grayson said. "If somebody wanted to hide them, they cut the paper trail clean." "Then I'll look for what's missing," Elena said, a steel threat in her tone. "Missing has a shape if you know how to trace it." His radio crackled before he could answer. "Dispatch. Cole, I've got your call history. Lincoln Court logged exactly 0 calls in the last 36 months, which is weird for that block. Oh, and county says the house transferred twice. Bank to private buyer to an LLC registered out of a UPS store 3 towns over. No contact number on file." Grayson's jaw tightened. "Shell company, hiding in plain sight." "Send me the LLC paperwork," he said. "I'll take a drive after I speak to records." He slid his phone back into his pocket and felt the next move harden inside his chest. "Ask too much. You spooked the wrong person. Ask too little. You missed the door while you're standing in the hall." He looked through the window into the exam room. June had finally let her eyelids drop. Lila held the dog tag in one hand and the edge of the blanket in the other, a kid who'd learned to sleep with one eye open. Hunter didn't sleep. He watched. "You ever think about how some dogs choose a post?" Samantha asked quietly. "Like they decide, this is the thing I stand in front of." "Every day," Grayson said. "What's yours?" she asked. "Depends on the day," he said. "Today it's those two." Elena tucked a damp curl behind her ear and closed her binder. "I'll pull Salem files and call Clearwater up north. If Mom exists in the system, I'll find her." Grayson nodded. "I'll find whoever thinks he owns these kids." He didn't say he by accident. Maybe that was bias. Maybe it was cop instinct. Maybe it was the shape missing from the map. He stepped back into the room to tell the girls he'd be down the hall a while, and that Hunter, if it was okay with the nurses, would stay. June's eyes opened just enough to find the pause and then closed again, like the answer had been as simple as breathing. "Hunter's on duty," he said, mostly to Lila, because she needed something that sounded like a plan. "No one gets past him. That's just a rule now." Lila nodded once. The smallest agreement, the fragile start of a pact. Outside, the rain softened. In Pine Hollow, that's what counted as a good sign. It didn't mean the storm was over. It meant you had a window to prepare for whatever was next. Grayson checked his watch, touched the radio mic on his shoulder, and headed for records. He had a list in his head and a line he was willing to cross if the paperwork didn't give him what he needed. Behind him, in a wheat-colored room humming with recycled air, a dog lay like a sentry at the edge of a hospital bed and held back the dark. The next morning, Pine Hollow woke under a sky the color of tin. Low clouds hung heavy over the pines, pressing the air down until even the songbirds seemed to give up. Deputy Grayson Cole sat at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold. Hunter sprawled on the floor at his boots, paws twitching in some half-dream. Grayson's laptop sat open to the county records portal, its progress wheel spinning like a bad joke. Property files for 223 Lincoln Court were still processing. He'd been staring at that word for 20 minutes. He reached down, ran a hand over Hunter's head. "We're not going to get this from a server," he muttered. "We're going to have to dig." Hunter's tail gave a slow thump. By the time he got to the county records office, a low brick building that always smelled faintly of toner and dust, it was barely 9. The clerk from yesterday, a woman named Marlene who wore her readers on a chain and had a knack for finding what others missed, waved him in. "I pulled what you asked," she said, sliding a manila folder across the counter, "and I highlighted the weird parts." Grayson flipped it open. First transfer, bank foreclosure to a private buyer. Second transfer, just 3 months later, to an LLC called Northwind Holdings. Registered mailing address? A UPS store in Rockford, 3 towns over. No phone number, no physical office. "Northwind's a ghost," Marlene said. "It exists on paper. But if you wanted to find a human behind it, good luck." "Somebody's name's on the articles of incorporation," Grayson said. "Not necessarily. Could be a registered agent. And those folks are paid to keep the real name out of sight." Grayson closed the folder. "Then I'll start at the UPS store." The Rockford UPS store sat in a strip mall between a vape shop and a nail salon. A bell over the door announced him to a teenager in a brown apron, scrolling her phone behind the counter. "Looking for the box holder for Northwind Holdings," Grayson said, flashing his badge. "Need a contact name." She barely glanced up. "Can't give out box info without a subpoena." Grayson leaned just far enough for his voice to drop. "Not even to keep 2 kids safe?" That made her look at him. Really look. "Box gets checked once a month. Guy's mid-40s, tall, wears a ball cap, pays cash 6 months at a time. That's all I got." "Any car?" She shrugged. "Big Ford truck, black, new." It wasn't much, but it was more than the file. Back in Pine Hollow, the hospital let him know the girls were cleared for a short transfer. Just to a secure room at the sheriff's station, where they'd be kept comfortable while Child and Family Services figured out next steps. Elena Hart had agreed to ride along. When Grayson arrived at the medical center, Lila was sitting cross-legged on the bed, June curled against her side. Hunter stretched along the foot like he'd grown roots. The dog's eyes flicked to the door when Grayson entered, then back to the girls. "Ready for a little field trip?" he asked gently. Lila's shoulders tensed. June's hand found Hunter's ear. "He's coming too," Grayson added. "It's just down the street." That got the smallest nod from Lila. The interview room at the sheriff's station wasn't an interrogation space. Not today. Carmichael had them use the old conference room with its sun-faded blinds, a couch that sagged in the middle, and a table scattered with coloring books from the station's annual toy drive. Someone had set out 2 mugs of hot chocolate with marshmallows sinking into a pale foam. Hunter made a slow circuit of the room, sniffing corners, then settled by the couch. Lila and June gravitated toward him instantly. Elena sat across from them, flipping open a thin binder. She didn't look at the papers right away. Instead, she started with, "I've been thinking about you two, about how much it takes to get through what you've gotten through, and about how sometimes the best way to start is with what you don't want to talk about." Lila's chin lifted a fraction, like she was listening but reserving judgment. "So," Elena went on, "I'm not going to ask about the house. Not yet. I'm going to ask about what makes you feel safe." June's answer was immediate. "Him," she said, nodding at Hunter. The dog blinked slow, like he knew exactly what was said. Elena smiled. "Hunter's a good choice. Anyone else?" Lila hesitated. Her gaze flicked to Grayson, then to the window. "There used to be," she said finally, "but she's gone." "She?" Elena asked, gentle. "Our mom." The words were flat, practiced. "But she didn't leave." That sentence hung in the air. Grayson felt his chest tighten. After Elena eased the conversation towards safer ground, school subjects, favorite foods, she closed the binder and stepped into the hall with Grayson. "They don't believe their mother abandoned them," she said quietly. "That matters. If I can pull the right files from Salem, We might prove it. Why do I think the name on those files is going to match the guy behind that LLC? Grayson asked. Because sometimes the obvious line is the right one. And sometimes, Elena said, people get sloppy when they think they have erased the trail. The trail led unexpectedly to Samantha. That afternoon, she called Grayson from her clinic. You might want to see this, she said. The girls came in for a quick checkup. And when I set their duffel bag on the counter, something fell out. It was a small leather-bound journal, its cover cracked, pages warped from moisture. Inside, sketches of two girls' faces over and over again, always side by side, always ringed with hearts. Notes about medication dosages, half-finished grocery lists, and near the back a folded letter. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. Lila and June, I am so sorry I'm not there. I never wanted to leave you. I never would. My sickness isn't the kind you see. It's the kind that makes the world too loud, too dark. But I'm trying to get better so I can come home. Don't believe anyone who says I gave you away. I am your mother. I love you. Always. Mom. Grayson read it twice, then a third time, feeling his pulse thud in his temples. This isn't abandonment, he said. This is someone cashing in on her being too sick to fight back. By evening, the air in Pine Hollow had the edge of an incoming storm. Grayson sat at his desk, the journal open beside him, the manila folder from county records stacked on top. The name Northwind Holdings stared back at him from the deed. And now he had a letter that tied the girls to a mother who'd never let go of them. Not in her heart, not on paper. He pulled up the secure state database and ran a search for guardianship filings connected to the girls' birth certificates. There it was, a petition filed 3 years ago by a man named Clint Maddox. Same month Marina Hale, the girl's mother, was placed under psychiatric care. Temporary custody granted pending follow-up. There'd been no follow-up. The pattern was taking shape in his head, ugly and familiar. Find someone vulnerable. Take what they can't defend. Hide the evidence behind shell companies and bureaucratic dust. And now Maddox, or whoever he was working with, was the only barrier between two girls and the mother they thought they'd lost. Grayson closed the laptop. The rest could wait until morning. Tonight he was making sure those girls and the one four-legged guardian they trusted slept under a roof that locked. He stood, Hunter rising with him, ready as always. Let's go, partner, he said. We've got a post to hold. Hunter's tail swished once. Outside, the first drops of the storm hit the pavement, steady and sure, like a clock starting its countdown. The storm rolled in overnight, turning Pine Hollow's streets into black mirrors under the streetlights. By dawn, the air was thick with the scent of wet pine and diesel from the early morning logging trucks rumbling down Highway 7. Deputy Grayson Cole had been at his desk since 6, the girl's journal open beside a steaming mug of fresh coffee. Hunter lay at his feet, chin on paws, ears twitching at every passing sound in the hallway. The night had been uneventful in the literal sense, no break-ins, no disturbances. But inside Grayson's mind, things had been moving fast. Every detail from the last 48 hours lined up like pins waiting to be knocked over. The shell company, holding title to the Lincoln Court property. The petition for temporary guardianship filed 3 years ago by Clint Maddox. The letter from Marina Hale, proving she never surrendered her daughters. It was a clean pattern if you knew what to look for. And Grayson had spent most of his career knowing exactly what to look for. At 7:10, Elena Hart arrived, her trench coat dripping onto the station floor. She set a thermos on his desk without asking if he needed more caffeine. Salem came through, she said, flipping open a thin, rain-spotted file. Maddox has priors? Grayson asked. No convictions, but a history of proximity to trouble. She tapped a page with neatly painted nails. Civil suits over unpaid debts, a restraining order in Spokane that never made it past the temporary stage, and a bankruptcy filing from 6 years ago. The kind of guy who moves just enough to stay out of reach. Grayson skimmed the sheet. No permanent address since 2018. Every place he lists is either a P.O. box or a short-term rental. Elena leaned in. One of those rentals? Outside Rockford, 6 months ago, paid cash. Landlord says he left in the middle of the night. No forwarding address, but she flipped another page. He left a couple of things behind. A battered duffel bag. Inside, a gas bill from a cabin property up in Grayson Ridge. Grayson's brow furrowed. That's old logging country. Half those roads aren't even on GPS. Which is exactly why I think you and Hunter should take a drive. The ridge sat 30 miles north, past two logging gates in a stretch of switchbacks that would make an out-of-towner queasy. By the time Grayson's SUV crested the last hill, the rain had eased into a mist that clung to the windshield like frost. Hunter stood in the passenger seat, nose lifted toward the cracked window. His body went from relaxed to rigid in the space of a breath. "You smell something, partner?" Grayson asked. Hunter's tail gave a single, deliberate sway. Then he whined low in his throat, the sound he made when the trail was fresh. Grayson slowed as the gravel road narrowed, tree limbs arching overhead like a tunnel. The cabin appeared suddenly, a weather-beaten structure tucked into a stand of cedar. The front porch sagged under the weight of years, and one shutter hung by a single rusted hinge. There was no sign of a vehicle, no light in the windows, but in the mud just beyond the porch steps, a set of tire tracks gleamed wet. Recent. Grayson parked 50 yards back and cut the engine. "Stay sharp," he murmured. They approached on foot, boots sinking into the soft ground. Hunter's ears flicked, his nose working overtime. When they reached the porch, the dog veered left, pulling Grayson toward the side of the cabin. There, half hidden under a blue tarp weighed down with cinder blocks, sat a black Ford F-250. Grayson crouched to check the plates. Organ tags? Expired. And under the grime on the back bumper, the faint outline of a dealership sticker from Spokane. "Maddox," he muttered. He was about to circle back to the front when Hunter froze, head snapping toward the tree line behind the cabin. A second later, Grayson heard it too. Branches breaking, quick footsteps in the underbrush. He didn't need to tell Hunter twice. "Go!" The shepherd launched forward, a streak of sable and black against the wet green of the forest. Grayson followed, heart pounding, ducking under low limbs and leaping over roots slick with rain. Through the mist, a figure burst into view. Tall, lean, wearing a camo jacket and a ball cap pulled low. The man glanced back, saw the dog closing the distance, and veered hard downhill. Bad choice. Hunter hit him square in the side, teeth catching just above the wrist. The man went down in the mud with a shout that broke into a string of curses. By the time Grayson reached them, Hunter had shifted his weight just enough to keep the man pinned without tearing flesh. "Clint Maddox," Grayson said, breath steady despite the run. "You're under arrest for unlawful imprisonment, fraud, and endangering the welfare of a minor." Maddox spat mud. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Grayson said, snapping the cuffs onto his wrists. "And the rest, you're going to tell a judge." Back at the SUV, Grayson secured Maddox in the back seat, while Hunter hopped into the passenger side, eyes still locked on the suspect through the grate. On the drive back, Maddox kept up a low mutter about lies and misunderstandings, but every so often his gaze flicked to the journal lying on the dash where Grayson had said it earlier. That told Grayson more than any confession. Maddox knew exactly what it was and what it meant for him. When they rolled into Pine Hollow, Elena was waiting in the sally port, binder in hand. Her eyebrows lifted when she saw the cuffs. "Found him sniffing around his truck," Grayson said. "Good work. I'll start the interview." But before she could turn away, Maddox twisted in his seat. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," Elena said coolly. "And while you wait, I'll be cataloging the evidence from your cabin." His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak again. Two deputies headed out to secure the cabin and bring back anything that looked relevant. Paperwork, electronics, even personal items that could tie Maddox to the girl's time in the cellar. Grayson, meanwhile, went straight to the conference room where Lila and June were still camped with Hunter. The moment the dog stepped through the door, June launched herself off the couch and wrapped her arms around his neck. Lila didn't move about quite as fast, but her eyes tracked Grayson like she was trying to read the truth in his expression. "You found him," she said, not of a question. "I did," Grayson said, "and he won't be coming near you again." June buried her face in Hunter's fur. Lila's shoulders eased just enough to be noticeable. Elena joined them a few minutes later, her face careful. "Girls, I'm going to be asking you some questions over the next few days. But for now, I just need you to know you're safe. Clint Maddox is in custody." Lila's jaw worked. "He said she left us." "Sometimes people lie to protect themselves," Elena said. "The truth is, your mom never stopped loving you." June peeked up. "Where is she?" Elena glanced at Grayson. This was the line they'd agreed to hold until they had everything in place. "She's somewhere safe," Elena said, "and we're working to bring her to you." That night, as the rain tapered off and the streetlights cast long, glistening shadows across Main Street, Grayson sat at his kitchen table again. Hunter lay nearby, the rhythmic sound of his breathing the only thing breaking the quiet. The journal sat open in front of him, next to the file on Northwind Holdings. Maddox's arrest was a step, a big one, but it wasn't the finish line. Somewhere upstate, a woman named Marina Hale was waiting for someone to believe her. And now that someone had to be him. He reached down, scratching behind Hunter's ears. "Tomorrow we find her," he said. Hunter's eyes opened, steady and sure. If dogs could speak, Grayson figured the answer would have been the same one he'd given all along. "I'm with you." The next morning, the storm had moved east, leaving Pine Hollow washed clean, but quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The streets glistened under pale sunlight, puddles reflecting the bare limbs of the maples that lined Main Street. Deputy Grayson Cole stood at the edge of his desk, a fresh cup of coffee in one hand, Marina Hale's journal in the other. The leather cover was soft from years of handling. The ink inside faded in places where moisture had bled through. Every page felt like a voice reaching out from somewhere he hadn't been yet. Hunter sat on the floor beside him, tail wrapped around his paws, watching every move as if the next order might come at any moment. Elena Hart stepped in without knocking, a folder tucked under her arm. "I've got a lead," she said, dropping the file onto the desk. "Clearwater Recovery Center, Northern Idaho. Marina Hale was admitted 3 years ago, diagnosed with severe PTSD and major depressive disorder. She's been stable for over a year. Discharge plan was pending, but she never left." Grayson flipped open the file. A photo was clipped to the first page. Marina in her mid-30s, pale green eyes that seemed older than her face, hair pulled back loosely. There was a guardedness in her expression, but also something stubborn. "Why hasn't she been released?" he asked. Elena hesitated. "Her caseworker told me she's been waiting for word about her daughters. When she was told they were placed for adoption, she stopped pushing to leave. Said she didn't have a reason to start over if they were gone." Grayson's jaw tightened. So Maddox didn't just take the girls. He made sure she thought she'd lost them for good. An hour later, Grayson was behind the wheel of the SUV, heading east on Highway 7, with Hunter stretched across the passenger seat, head tilted toward the window. Elena rode in the back, going through the rest of the file. Clearwater sat just over the state line, a 2-hour drive if the roads cooperated. They didn't. Heavy snowmelt had left sections of the highway slick, and twice they passed crews clearing small rock slides. Still, the closer they got, the more Grayson felt the tension in his shoulders shift. Not easing exactly, but focusing. This wasn't just about locking Maddox away anymore. It was about putting the family back together before the damage became permanent. Clearwater Recovery Center didn't look like the mental health facilities Grayson had seen in his career. It was housed in a converted lakeside lodge with white siding, a green metal roof, and wide windows that looked out over pine-covered hills. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and cedar. A tall man with silvering hair and warm brown eyes met them at the front desk. His name tag read Dr. Ilis Choudhury. "You're here about Marina Hale," he said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd seen more than his share of storms. "She's having a good day." Grayson exchanged a glance with Elena. "She know we're coming?" Choudhury shook his head. "I thought it best to keep it a surprise. Sometimes anticipation brings its own weight." They followed him down a carpeted hallway that smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon polish. Outside a set of glass doors, a small garden bloomed despite the chill, raised beds of herbs, a bench under a trellis, and the quiet lap of water from the lake just beyond the fence. Marina sat alone on the bench, a cream cardigan draped over her shoulders, hands folded in her lap. Her hair hung loose, curling slightly at the ends. She stared out at the water, her posture neither tense nor relaxed, just waiting. When she turned at the sound of their footsteps, her eyes went first to Elena, then to Grayson. Finally, they landed on Hunter. For a moment, the dog simply looked back at her, ears tilting forward. Then he walked toward her without a command. Marina's lips parted. "I know you," she said softly. Hunter stopped just short of her knees, letting her reach out. Her fingers brushed his fur like she was afraid he'd vanish if she touched him too hard. "Marina," Elena began, "we've spoken on the phone before. This is Deputy Grayson Cole. And Hunter." Marina's gaze stayed on the dog. "He smells like them," she whispered. Grayson stepped closer. "Your daughters?" Her breath caught. "Yes. They're safe," he said. "They're here in Pine Hollow." She blinked rapidly as if trying to focus her vision. "No, they were adopted. They're gone." "They were taken," Grayson said gently. By Clint Maddox. He's in custody now. They've been asking about you." For a long moment, Marina didn't speak. Then her shoulders shook once, and she pressed both hands to her mouth. "They're alive," she whispered into her palms. "Oh God, they're alive." They sat with her for nearly an hour, letting the conversation come in waves. Sometimes a question, sometimes silence. Sometimes a story about the girls before everything fell apart. Marina spoke of baking muffins on Saturday mornings, of Lila's love for books with maps in them, of June's habit of carrying pebbles in her pockets just in case she needed a lucky one. Every so often, Hunter would rest his head on her knee, and she'd absently stroke his ears while she talked. When she grew tired, Dr. Chowdhury stepped in. "We'll start her discharge paperwork today," he said. "With support, she's more than ready to leave." The drive back to Pine Hollow was quieter. Marina rode in the back with Elena, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Hunter sat up front with Grayson, occasionally turning his head to check the back seat. "You think they'll recognize her right away?" Elena asked quietly. Grayson kept his eyes on the road. "I think some things go deeper than memory. They'll know." Back at the sheriff's station, the girls were still in the conference room, coloring books spread across the table, mugs of now cold cocoa pushed to the side. When Marina stepped through the door, she froze just inside the threshold. Lila looked up first, eyes narrowing like she was measuring the stranger. June followed, pencil slipping from her fingers. "Lila," Marina said, her voice trembling. "June." Neither girl moved at first. Then Lila stood, slow and cautious, crossing the space between them until she was an arm's length away. "You're real," she said. Marina's breath hitched. "I've always been real, and I've never stopped loving you." June was the one who broke first, running forward and burying her face in Marina's sweater. Lila followed a second later, arms wrapping tight around both of them. Hunter stood just behind, tail swaying gently, his eyes on the door as if guarding the moment from the rest of the world. They sat together for a long time, no one rushing them. Grayson leaned against the doorway, the weight in his chest easing for the first time in days. It wasn't over. There were still hearings, still paperwork, still the possibility that Maddox had more angles to play. But for now, the right people were in the same room. And for now, that was enough. The courthouse in Pine Hollow hadn't seen this much traffic in years. By the time Deputy Grayson Cole pulled into the back lot, the front steps were already crowded with townsfolk pretending they were just passing by. The air was crisp, sunlight glinting off patches of frost still clinging to the grass. The kind of morning that felt quieter than it should have, like the town itself was holding its breath. Inside, the hum of conversation bounced off the marble floors. Reporters from the county paper hovered near the clerk's desk, notebooks ready. On the far side of the hall, Ruth Bellamy from the Children's Justice Fund was reviewing her notes, her navy suit pressed sharp, her expression one of calm precision. Grayson walked in with Hunter at his side, the dog's black and tan coat catching the light. People stepped aside automatically, part respect, part curiosity. Hunter's name had been on the front page of the Pine Hollow Chronicle 2 days ago, under the headline, "K-9 leads deputy to missing sisters." Ruth looked up as they approached. "Cole," she greeted, extending a hand. "Glad you're here. And glad he's here." She bent slightly to scratch Hunter behind the ears. "We're going to need both of you." Grayson's eyes shifted toward the double doors of the courtroom. "Maddox?" "In holding," Ruth said, his attorneys already posturing. "They're going to paint him as a misunderstood caretaker, which means we have to make the truth impossible to ignore." By mid-morning, the pretrial hearing was underway. Maddox sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, hair slicked back, jaw tight. Every so often, his eyes darted toward the gallery, scanning faces like he was still in control of something. Ruth opened with a concise summary. "The evidence will show that Clint Maddox knowingly and unlawfully imprisoned 2 minors, concealed their whereabouts for years, and profited from fraudulent welfare and guardianship claims. This is not a custody dispute. This is calculated exploitation." Maddox's attorney countered with a carefully crafted plea for understanding, citing difficult circumstances and miscommunication between agencies. But each time he tried to frame Maddox as the victim of a system failure, Ruth was ready with documentation. Photocopies of falsified forms, bank statements showing unaccounted deposits, the forged life insurance application in Marina Hale's name. During a recess, Grayson stepped outside into the thin winter sunlight. Hunter followed, staying close enough that their shadows overlapped on the pavement. Elena Hart joined them, a paper cup of coffee in hand. Ruth shredding him in there, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. But we're not done. We need testimony that sticks, not just in the record, but in the jury's gut. You want Marina, Grayson said. She's ready, Elena replied. Dr. Chowdhury cleared her to travel under supervision. She wants to speak. Grayson exhaled slowly. The defense will go after her mental health. Of course they will, Elena said. That's why we'll lead with it. She's stable, she's lucid, and she's the one person who can put Maddox exactly where he belongs. When court resumed, Marina took the stand. She wore a simple gray sweater, her hair pulled back, a silver chain with two tiny initials, L and J, resting at her collarbone. Her hands trembled once as she adjusted the microphone, but her voice, when it came, was steady. She told them about the weeks before her hospitalization, the symptoms she didn't understand, the fear of becoming a danger to her own children. She told them about trusting Maddox, someone she thought was a friend, to watch Lila and June while she sought treatment. Then she told them about the letters. I wrote to them, she said, eyes fixed on the jurors. Every week, birthdays, holidays, days when the sun came out after a long winter. I didn't hear back, but I thought maybe they were too young to write. I didn't know he was telling them I'd left for good. Her voice broke on that last line. In the gallery, a few people shifted, some with tight jaws, others blinking hard. Next came the journal. Ruth handed it to Marina, who confirmed it was hers. The worn cover, the sketches of the girls, the letter folded near the back, all entered into evidence. Ruth didn't need to dramatize it. The weight was in the pages themselves. Maddox didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the table, fingers curled into fists. Grayson took the stand after lunch. He described the day on Lincoln Court, the sound from the grate, the cellar, and the girl's condition. They weren't hiding him, he said. They were surviving. There's a difference. Ruth's last question was simple. Deputy Cole, if it weren't for Hunter, would we be here today? Grayson looked down at the dog lying calmly at his feet, then back at the jury. No, we wouldn't. By late afternoon, the evidence was stacked high and neat in front of the judge. Ruth rested her case with a quiet confidence that filled the room more than any grand speech could have. Outside in the corridor, Marina sat with Lila and June, the three of them sharing a bench under a tall window where sunlight spilled in like warm water. Hunter lay across their feet, his head resting on Lila's sneakers. They'll decide soon, Grayson said, stopping beside them. Marina nodded, her hand resting lightly on June's shoulder. Whatever happens in there, she said softly, they're not taking us apart again. The jury was out less than 5 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. Guilty on all counts. The air shifted in the courtroom, relief, tension, a hum of murmured voices. Maddox sat stone-faced as the judge sentenced him to 32 years in state prison, no possibility of parole. Outside, a small crowd had gathered on the courthouse steps. Some clapped when they saw Marina and the girls emerge. Others simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that in a town like Pine Hollow, justice wasn't just a legal term, it was personal. That night, Grayson drove out to Maple Lane, where Marina was settling into a modest white cottage on the edge of town. The kitchen light was on, and through the window he could see her at the table with the girls, laughter breaking free for the first time in what must have felt like forever. Hunter stood at the edge of the yard, tail wagging slowly. When Grayson opened the gate, the shepherd trotted inside like he'd always belonged there. You're staying tonight? Grayson asked him, half smiling. Hunter didn't answer, of course. He just bounded up the porch steps and disappeared into the warm light. Grayson lingered by the gate, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the scene inside. For the first time in months, the weight between his shoulders eased. There was still work ahead, paperwork, follow-ups, making sure Maddox's conviction stuck through appeal. But for tonight, the right people were home. And that was enough. Spring crept back into Pine Hollow without anyone making a big announcement about it. The snow melted from the eaves one slow drip at a time. The maples along Main Street pushed out their first green buds, and the air in the morning smelled faintly of wet earth instead of wood smoke. On Maple Lane, life had started to take a quieter rhythm. Marina Hale's cottage, with its peeling white paint and porch swing that creaked in the breeze, had become more than just a safe place. It was home again. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon toast most mornings, and the sound of two girls laughing could drift all the way out to the mailbox. Hunter had claimed the rug in the living room as his post. He still perked up at the sound of the front gate or a car slowing on the road, But most days he slept with one ear cocked toward the hallway where the girls played. Lila and June took turns brushing him after school, and every evening he made a slow lap of the yard before settling in for the night like he was personally signing off on security. 2 weeks after the verdict, the town hosted its annual spring festival, a tradition that had been skipped the year before because of flooding. This year, the square was lined with booths selling pinoys, quilts, and wooden toys. The scent of kettle corn floated on the breeze, mingling with the music from a bluegrass band playing under the gazebo. Grayson walked the festival with a coffee in one hand and Hunter's leash in the other. People stopped them every few feet, clapping Grayson on the shoulder, crouching to scratch Hunter's head, telling him he was a good boy like it was breaking news. Hunter accepted the attention with the same quiet dignity he'd shown in the field, tail wagging just enough to let folks know he appreciated it. Near the center of the square, a new bronze statue stood on a stone base. It had been unveiled just that morning. A life-size German shepherd in mid-stride, ears alert, nose forward. The plaque read, "Hunter, the dog who heard what others ignored." Grayson paused with him in front of it, and Lila and June came running up, Marina following at a slower pace. The girls each carried a small bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked from the edge of the festival grounds. "They're for him," June said, pointing at the statue. Hunter sniffed the flowers when they lowered them to his level, then sat back, looking up at the bronze version of himself with what almost looked like curiosity. Lila knelt beside him and whispered something only he could hear. Whatever it was made his tail thump once against the cobblestones. Later that afternoon, Grayson found himself at Marina's booth. She and the girls had baked pies, apple, blackberry, and one peach that had already sold out. The table was covered with a gingham cloth, and a handwritten sign said "Hail Family Pies, baked with love." "You're branching out," Grayson said, sliding a few bills into the donation jar. "Therapy," Marina replied with a small smile, "and a way to start over without feeling like I owe the world an explanation." The girls were busy behind her, arranging pie boxes and sneaking each other crumbs. Hunter lay at their feet, eyes half-lidded but still tracking the movement of anyone who came near. "You've got good security," Grayson said. Marina's gaze softened as she looked at the dog. "He saved more than just them," she said quietly. "He gave me something to trust again." That night, after the festival, lights dimmed and the square emptied, Grayson drove back to the cottage. He had something in the passenger seat. Hunter's K9 vest, cleaned and folded, the badge still clipped to the strap. On the porch, the girls were curled up under a blanket with Hunter between them, the soft murmur of Marina's voice coming from just inside the door. Grayson stepped up, holding the vest. "I think it's time," he said. Lila's brow furrowed. "Time for what?" "For him to retire," Grayson said gently. "He's done his duty. Now he gets to just be yours." June's eyes widened. "Forever?" Grayson nodded. "Forever." He knelt, slipping the vest over Hunter's head one last time, fastening the strap, then unclipping the badge and placing it in Lila's hand. "This belongs here now," he said. Hunter stood still through the whole thing, then shook once, the vest sliding off into Grayson's hands. He licked Lila's knuckles, then flopped back down between them with a sigh, as if he'd just signed off on the arrangement. The weeks that followed settled into something that felt like peace. Marina started volunteering at the community center, teaching a weekend baking class. The girls went back to school, their worlds expanding beyond the four walls they'd once been confined to. And Hunter, true to his nature, never strayed far from their side. Grayson still saw them regularly, sometimes for official check-ins, more often for no reason at all. He'd stop by after a shift, coffee in hand, and find them in the backyard, the girls playing while Hunter patrolled the fence line. Other times he'd catch them walking down Main Street together, a picture of something he knew they'd all fought hard to get back. One evening in late May, as the sun set behind the ridge and painted the clouds gold, Marina invited him to stay for dinner. They ate on the porch, plates balanced on their laps, Hunter stretched out at their feet. Fireflies began to blink in the tall grass beyond the fence. "Feels different now," Marina said softly, watching the girls chase each other across the yard. Grayson nodded. "It should." "I don't mean just for us," she said. "I mean the town. People stop me in the store. They say they were glad to see us. That doesn't happen everywhere." "That's Pine Hollow," Grayson said. "Small towns remember who they stand behind." Hunter lifted his head at the sound of his name, even though it hadn't been spoken. The dog's gaze moved from the girls to the yard, to the fading light, then back again, as if checking every piece of his world before letting it settle for the night. As darkness fell and the porch light flicked on, Lila and June came running up, breathless, and to drop down beside him. June leaned into his shoulder and Lila rested her head against his neck. "You could have gone back to chasing bad guys," Lila whispered, "but you picked us." Hunter didn't move, didn't make a sound, but his eyes softened, and in that quiet way dogs have, he told her she was right. Sometimes miracles don't come with sirens or headlines. Sometimes they arrive on four legs, with steady eyes and a heart that refuses to give up. For Pine Hollow, Hunter wasn't just a hero, he was a reminder that even in the darkest corners, someone's still listening for the sound that everyone else ignores. Thank you for following this story. In a world where headlines can make us feel like hope is in short supply, stories like this remind us it's still out there, waiting to be found, sometimes in the shape of a dog who just won't quit. What about you? If you could thank one animal that made a difference in your life, whether they're still with you or not, what would you say to them?